Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. Welcome to Mastering Aurora HDR 2018. In this episode 2 of Mastering Aurora HDR 2018, we're going to take this bracketed set of images that are in Lightroom and we're going to send them over into Aurora HDR 2018 and merge them into a single HDR image. So we're going to be using Aurora HDR 2018 as a Lightroom plugin. Now, before you try to do that, you first have to install it as a plugin into Lightroom. It's very, very easy to do. So what you need to do is open up Aurora HDR 2018. And if you have a Mac, you're going to go up to this top Aurora HDR 2018 menu. If you have a PC, that is under the File menu. So you want to open that up, and you'll see right here, Install Plugins. Just click on that, and you'll see that this dialog box pops up, and it will come up with different programs that you could install Aurora HDR 2018 as a plugin. And you could see I already installed it in Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. I could uninstall it by clicking that button. If they weren't installed, that would stay install, just like it says for Adobe Photoshop Elements here. Now, I do not have Apple Aperture on my computer, so that is grayed out. So I already have them installed as a plugin in both Photoshop and Lightroom, so I'm good to go. If you don't, just click on the install button. You may have to enter your username password for the operating system you're using, and then it will install them as a plugin. Now, in my case, as I mentioned, I already did. So I'm going to close down Aurora HDR 2018, and we're back in Lightroom. So I have a plugin installed, so I'm good to go here. What I recommend you do with Lightroom is especially if you're shooting RAW, do some specific adjustments first in Lightroom on all of the images before you send it over to Aurora HDR. Specifically, with a RAW image, make sure your white balance is correct. It's easier to correct in a RAW file than it would be in, say, a JPEG or a TIFF or something like that. So make sure your white balance is good. I would also do any lens corrections you may have to do. Now, of course, if you're using a mirrorless camera or Micro Four Thirds camera, that's already built into your RAW file most likely, and you don't have to click any of these boxes. But I would definitely do that. Also, if your images are relatively noisy, I would go into the detail panel and I would do some noise reduction also. I wouldn't do any sharpening. You could take care of that in Aurora HDR. Now, I have this bracketed set of images of the Our Lady of Victory Basilica here in Buffalo, and I want to create an HDR image. Now, I have this image, which my camera said is properly exposed, and then I have this image, which is 2 stops underexposed, and that one, which is 1 stop underexposed. Then I have the other side of the exposure spectrum. I have this one, which is 1 stop overexposed, and that one, which is 2 stops overexposed. Now, I mentioned you could send all 5 if you want, but you don't usually have to. In this case, I think I'm going to send this one, which my camera deemed to be properly exposed. But I'm not going to send either of the ones that are overexposed. I don't think I really need to. I'm going to send that one, and I'm going to send these darker ones. And the reason why I want to send the darker ones is there are some stained glass windows up here. And you can see even at 2 stops underexposed, it's slightly blown out there. But I want to try to rescue as much detail as possible in those highlights. So I want to send those darker images. So I'm going to send those 3, the properly exposed, -1 stop, and -2 stops. Now, to do that, click on one of the images, then hold your Command key in if you have a Mac, or Control key if you have a PC, and click on each subsequent image while holding in that key. So I'm going to click on that one and that one. So I have all 3 selected. Now, there's a couple different ways you could get them into Aurora HDR 2018. The easiest way, and the way I recommend, is just to right-click on the image right on screen, then go down to Export. Now, don't try to go into Edit In. You won't find it there. Go down to Export. Now you'll see there's little categories, and you can see it's kind of grayed out, but it says Aurora HDR 2018, and you have two choices. You could edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. Now I did do some Lightroom adjustments, so that's what I want to do. The choice below it is open source files. Now I mentioned in lesson 1 that with Aurora HDR 2018, you can edit raw files with it, which is great. It really doesn't edit the raw file directly, but it will read the raw file and allow you to do edits non-destructively to it. If you do take this choice, it will not include any of your Lightroom edits. And since I did do lens corrections and I did do some white balance adjustments, I need those to go with the images over to Aurora HDR. So I want to use that first one, edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So we're going to click right there. And when you do that, you can see there's a little status bar in the top left-hand corner of Lightroom, and that's now actually converting your raw files into, I believe, a TIFF file, if I remember correctly, and it will send those TIFF files, 3 TIFF files, over to Aurora HDR. Now, one note, I do sell all the images that I do in my video series. You could buy them, for $10, all the images. I will not be selling you the raw files. I found that many people have slow internet connections, and the raw files being so large, and there's going to be so many images that many people cannot download them. So I'm going to be converting everything to JPEG because they're smaller. You'll still be able to learn how to use the program and do the exact adjustments that I do. Everything will be the same. It's just a smaller download. Also, even though this was a 5 bracket set and I'm only using 3, if you download the images from me, you'll get all 5 images, and you could experiment with it. Try doing all 5, try doing 3, try doing 1 even, and see how it comes out. So you could do some experimental things with Aurora HDR. Also, I'll include some extra bracketed sets of scenes that aren't included in this video series, just to give you something to do. All right, now we're come up with this box. We talked about this in lesson 1. I'm going to click alignment. This was handheld. I did not use a tripod. I was in the middle of the church, and I don't think a tripod would have been proper. So I handheld this shot, so I'm going to click that box. Also, there were some people up here in the front pews, so I'm going to click Ghost Reduction, and I'm going to keep it at medium, and I'll use that middle image, which happens to be one stop underexposed, as my reference image. And I am not going to click Chromatic Aberration Removal, and I'm just going to click this button, Create HDR. So it's going to take those 3 images now and merge them into an HDR image. And again, minimal processing will be done. And when you use Aurora HDR 2018 as a plugin, the interface is very slightly different. If you look along the top here, you'll see there is no crop button. It's assumed that you're going to do all your cropping in Lightroom and then send the image over here, or edit the image over here when it gets back into Lightroom. Then you could crop it after the fact. So there is no crop button, as you could see up here. Okay, we have our image opened up in Aurora HDR 2018, and let's take a look at before after. I'm going to click on that little eyeball. There's before, there's after. Really not a lot done. We'll click on this before after slider, and you can see not a ton done there. It does look a little richer, less flat, but that's where the magic of the filters come in and what we're going to do. Now I'm going to go into a little more detail on some of the filters. In lesson 1, I went into great detail on the HDR basic filter, so I'm not going to go into as much detail on that filter. But I am going to pull right away HDR Enhance up. I'm going to pull Smart Tone up just a tiny bit, I think. I'm going to take my highlights down to see if I could get some more detail up in these windows, and it looks like I can. Shadows, I don't know what, maybe just right in there. I'm just eyeballing it. Let's see if I take whites down. Does that help those windows at all? A little bit. So blacks, I'm going to try to get a real black point. I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key down. That's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have Mac. Click on that black point, and I'm just going to be getting that. I like a little bit to clip. It seems to add a little more depth to the image. All right, so I think my basic adjustments are done. We're going to go down to color, and I'm going to add some vibrance. It's actually a very colorful church, and it's not really coming out that way. So I'm going to add a little saturation and some vibrance to the image. I might come back and readjust some things as we go along. Now, HDR structure, I mentioned in the first episode that will give you that really strong HDR look. We may not want that. But let's see if I could just get tease a little bit of sharpness out of there by just pushing the amount up a little bit. Now, if you look at the softness slider, that could be confusing. Just think of it as a detail slider, except it works opposite. Meaning, if you go to the right, you're going to add less detail or take detail away. If you go to the left, you're going to add some detail. So obviously, I want to make this more detailed, so I'm going to move it to the left. Boost kind of is like a volume control for the whole thing. So you could kind of, make everything a little more bolder and by moving that to the right, or make it a little more subdued to the left. I'm going to turn that way up. So I'm trying to get a little more detail in here. Right now it's still a little too flat for me, so I'm going to be working on maybe jump back into that basic panel and see what I could do up there. But let's stay here with this HDR structure panel. Micro structure, again, if we go too high, it looks a little bit too much like that HDR that I don't care for. So I am going to maybe give it 10, but I'm going to turn softness down. There, it's starting to come along a little bit better now. We're getting a lot more detail, especially up here in these letters, you can see. So it looks a lot better. There's not really a lot of noise in the image, so I'm not even going to add any denoise. Image radiance, usually I just take the amount and see what we're dealing with here. I don't like it at all in this image. It's kind of a dark image to begin with. It is rather dark in this basilica, so I don't like the looks of that. Typically, when you turn that up, then you would adjust smoothness to kind of give you, it's kind of like a contrast control. You could see how it makes the bright parts brighter when I move to the left, and when I go to the right, it makes the bright parts a little dimmer. Whereas the brightness will bring up just about everything. The shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. The shadow slider will open up the shadows a little bit. Let's bring those back down to there. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned in the first episode, if you want to reset a slider, all you need to do is double click on the name of the slider and you'll reset it. If you want to reset the whole filter, if you look over here on the right hand side next to the name, you'll see there's a little backward circular arrow. Click on that and it resets the filter completely. Also, if you want to see the effect the filter has on your image, this little eyeball will turn that filter on and off, so you could see it on and off. So we'll reset that. Let's see if we just add a touch of radiance and open up the shadows a touch. Let's see before, after. Before, after. It's so subtle. I'll leave it like that. Polarizing filter isn't going to really do much in here, so we're not going to do that. All right, details boost. I like this is so intricate and detailed in this basilica. I do want to kind of bring that out, but I want to be careful I don't do something like that. So I think we'll just move small detail up to 10, medium up to 9 or 10-ish, and large 5. Even that's borderline to me, but we'll see. Now, protection and masking, we talked about that before. I'm just going to move it and see how it affects our image. Not really doing much there, and masking, not doing a ton there either. So we'll put those at their default positions. Sometimes glow works really nice, like on street lights in the blue hour, something like that. This one, I don't think I want it because it's really going to make those windows probably just glow a little too much, and I don't really want them to do that. Top and bottom lighting. Let's see if we could do something with the top lighting and bring exposure down a little bit. It helps my windows considerably, as you can see. Let's see if we bring contrast down. We don't like contrast up or down. We'll reset that. I don't think I'm going to do anything with vibrance. Do I want to make it maybe a little cooler up there? Or a little warmer? Nah, I think it's fine right in the middle. So we're just going to bring exposure down a little bit up there in that dome. Let's see if we go with placement here, more down here, like that. I think that's good. All right, now it's still a tiny bit flat to me, so I'm going to add some contrast with the tone curve. I'm going to put in the typical kind of S curve. Now, you have the 4 different curves. You have the RGB curve, which affects all 3 colors at the same time, red, green, and blue. Or you have separate red, green, and blue tone curves, and you could affect just one color if you want. I'm going to go with the RGB, that one right there. And we'll pull down here and push up there. We'll put in that little slight S curve there. It's kind of making it almost too dark up here, so I'm going to go back up to my top bottom lighting and just open that up just a touch like that. HSL, I don't think I really need to do anything with that on this image, and we'll cover that in another episode coming up. We're not going to do any color toning either. Remember, that's equivalent to split toning in Lightroom. Dodge and burn, if there was a part, I'm going to just demonstrate this because this isn't one I use a lot. But if you click on Start Painting right here, you'll see up here in the tool attributes, we have lighten, darken, and erase. Lighten is though you're dodging, darken is though you're burning, and erase means you're just going to erase what you did. So let's say I want to lighten up in here. There's the size of the brush is turned on here. You could also use the bracket keys on your keyboard. The left bracket key makes the brush smaller. The right bracket key makes the brush bigger. The strength, do you want to go 100% or do you want to just bring it down a little bit? Typically, most of us that do dodging and burning prefer to do it in little bits. You don't want to overdo it. So keep the strength somewhere like around 20, let's say. And we're going to get a slightly smaller brush by hitting that left bracket key. And let's say we just want to brighten it up there. So we're going to do that and do that. Now you really didn't see much, but if you do it again and again and again, you'll start to see it starting to brighten up a little bit. And if I go over here and turn this dodge and burn filter off, you can see how it got darker. I'll turn it back on and it got lighter. And I could come back in here and click Start Painting again and paint it some more. Now, I really didn't need to do it for this image, but I'll leave it. And when you're done with the filter, just click Done right here in the far right-hand side. Now, in that case, I made it lighter. Of course, you do the same thing. If you were going to make it darker, you'd use, the darken button. And if you want to erase what you did, you'd use that eraser button. Now, we'll add a little vignette. Let's go down here and add a slightly dark vignette. And now we have size. You could bring it inside here. Let's do feathering all the way down and that all the way down so you could see what these other sliders do. Size, roundness, whether you make it more rectangular for this type of 2:3 ratioed image or more feathered or real abrupt. Inner brightness is one that I use quite often. Let's bring it like this. It'll just kind of brighten up the center of the image, and that actually adds a lot usually to the shot. So I'm going to reset this by hitting this backwards arrow up here. I am using that post crop vignette, and I almost never use a white vignette or a light vignette. So I'm going to put just a very subtle dark vignette on it, but I'm going to go to the inner brightness slider and I'm going to bring up the inner brightness a little. Just very subtle. My vignettes, I like to be very subtle, almost not noticeable. Now, I'm still not 100% satisfied with the image. It just doesn't seem to pop enough for me. Maybe the color temperature is a little warm. Maybe I'll come up here and pull it down just a touch and move tint over a little bit to the right and do the smart tone a little bit more. There, that. Just maybe a little bit more like that. even a little more. That looks decent. I mean, it's coming along. For the sake of this demonstration, I'd say, you know, it's okay. But for me personally, I think I'd want to work on this some more and make it pop a little more. If you do purchase my files, you could work on this, and I'm sure you could make it look really, really nice. Now, I'm done with the image. So up here in the top right-hand corner, because we're using this as a Lightroom plugin, just click on Apply. And you'll see that it's processing it. And when it's done, Aurora HDR 2018 will close, and we'll be back in Lightroom, and the image will be in Lightroom, already imported into Lightroom automatically. Okay, we're back into Lightroom, as you could see, and it brought it back in Lightroom right there. And that is our merged file. You can see now we have 6 down here, not the original 5. And that is our merged file that we just did in Aurora HDR 2018. All right, this is it for lesson 2. Now in lesson 3, we're going to work with layers. And we're going to introduce some other things. Maybe we'll talk about importing presets into your Aurora HDR 2018. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about filters and what you could do with some of those other filters we haven't done much with yet. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.